Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to our 30-minute webinar. My name is Matt Sykes, systems engineer here at Variphy, and I'll be your host in today's webinar. Today we're joined by Victor Verba, aka CDR Jesus, another systems engineer over here at Variphy. For today's webinar, we're going to cover rate tables within the application. So we're going to start with a quick overview of our company and what Variphy does. We'll jump into a live demo where Victor will guide us through rate tables, creating, implementing, and using them within the application. We'll pause for Q&A and get some of your questions answered. During the demo, though, if you have any questions on the content related, please make sure to ask them in the Q&A panel in the bottom right of the session of the screen, and that'll be the Q&A panel, not the WebEx chat, please. And after Q&A, we will reward one lucky attendee.
Hey, Matt, just to jump in here, bud. I'm not sure I'm seeing your screen here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And again, just to assure everybody, this is live. All right, now you're up and running here, pal.
Thank you, Victor. Yeah, that's surprising. I'm surprised that went over. Okay, so and here we are. So at number 4. So at the end, after Q&A, we will reward one lucky attendee a $50 Amazon gift card. So hang around to see what you may have won. So now a quick overview of Variphy. Variphy is the preferred analytics and management solutions for Cisco collaboration. We provide industry-leading CDR reporting and call analytics, customizable dashboards and widgets, UCCX reporting, remote phone control, change management. But today, we're going to be focused on call analytics and rate tables. If you have any other questions on any of our other features, we can most certainly take them offline and get those answered. All right. Okay, so before we get started on today's webinar, we want to announce that Variphy now offers a new service that provides managed consulting services to our customers and clients. Variphy's systems engineer team will be engaged on a one-on-one basis to remotely provide additional consulting, unassisted reporting, dashboarding configuration, and system monitoring assistance. This is a service that provides a dedicated Variphy SE to do all the heavy lifting of the report creation and dashboard generations. Please definitely, for more information, please contact us and we'll be glad to speak more in depth about our new service offering. All right, so I suppose let's get into the demo. All right, Vic, let's get us started here. I'm going to pass you the ball, sir.
All right, buddy.
And, oops. What happened to my share? Stop my sharing. Yeah. There we are. It should be in your hands now.
All right, here we go. All right, thank you everybody for joining us today. The purpose of today's session is to talk a little bit about rate tables. One of the things Variphy always says, and when somebody asks me about rates, you know, one of the main things that I'm always interested in when somebody asks me about rates is kind of how deep down the rabbit hole do you want to go? There's a lot of different things when somebody just says, hey, can we bill back calls? Do we need to know specific cities and towns and locations? Is it more for international dialing? Or is it really just what most of our customers need is just a rudimentary form to be able to, you know, show what a long distance costs is or what international costs are and things like that. Most of our customers don't need to go down the rabbit hole. They can create a few different rate lines that's going to accomplish everything that they're looking for, which is predominantly local costs, long distance costs, and international costs. And even local costs nowadays and long distance costs are fairly minute. So what we're going to go ahead and work on today is how to build a basic rate table that's going to be able to show your local costs, long distance costs, international costs, and we'll take a look at, you know, just how we can define some things like just flagging internal calls and things like that. So there's a lot of possibilities with rate tables. We don't supply a rate table. In other words, we don't charge you a rate table that has every area code, or charge you for a rate table that has every area code and prefix and dialing pattern and some generic long distance or international costing. But what we can do is build rate tables within Variphy. So today's session, we're going to build a basic rate table that's going to go ahead and show you how to create those costs in your system and generate those billing type reports. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is, because I'm looking for outbound calls, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to pick on a department placing some calls. So in my case, I'm going to pick on my finance department, and then I've got one more department over here that's got some data in it. And we're just going to run some reports for some very generic data. So I'm working out of the call history screen here, and in a minute, we're going to go ahead and get into reports and how we can build a report for the same information. Now you see we've got a lot of phone numbers here. So I've got some internal calls, I've got some external calls, I have some toll-free calls. So the main thing we need to identify to build a rate table is how do we know what's local, what's long distance, and what's international? So if you're a US-based company, international is pretty easy. Anybody that's dialing 011, it's an international call. So that's kind of step one is one, we've eliminated international, and we know how we can identify that. The next step is how do we identify what's local? Well, we identify what's local based on our local dialing patterns. Most of the time, it's just an area code. If you need to get specific and worry about local and local toll and things like that, that could be done in Variphy, and you'll see, demonstrate a little bit of how we would do that. But once we identify our local area code or what numbers we want to be local, the next thing we're going to say is, okay, well, if it's not international, which is 011, and if it's not local, which is my local dialing code, well, then everything else is going to be considered long distance with the exception of maybe some of your toll-free numbers. So essentially what we're doing is we're just defining our dialing patterns to fit the bill for local, long distance, international. All right, once we know what that is, we're going to go ahead and create a rate table to identify those. So to do that and Variphy, the first thing we're going to do is we're popping over to the gear over here on the right-hand side, and we're going to the rate table section. From the rate table section, this is where we get to create a rate table. So I'm going to click New Rate Table, and we're just going to create one from scratch here that's going to quickly identify local, long distance, toll-free, and international. So we'll just call this guy local_LD_INTL. All right, so just basically we're just giving this guy a name at this point. Then I'm going to save him. And the next thing it's going to do is it's going to bring us down to the bottom of the screen here where we get to add some rates. Again, once I click Add Rate here, we have a couple different options. Now, what we had talked about in the beginning was really just identifying what's local, what's international, what's toll-free, and then what's long distance. And the order in which we're going to put these in is just that. I'm going to go ahead and add my local dialing patterns. Then I'm going to add some toll-free, some international, and then everything outside of those categories, I'm going to go ahead and flag as long distance as long as it meets a dialing pattern that is normal for a long distance dial, 10 digits or 11 digits, or if you have lead 9, it may be 12 digits. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing we're going to do is we're going to create our local pattern. In my database, I've got a couple area codes that are flagged as local. This is for a Tennessee site. So I'm going to identify the local area codes for me. And I'm going to do that just by punching in the numbers here. And I'm going to say anything that starts with my local dialing pattern, which is 1615, and equals 11 digits. So I'm going to go 11. So now, anytime a call comes through my system that goes to a 1615 area code and is 11 digits long, and if you do the math, you got 1615 and the additional 8 digits. And if I scroll down here, I then get to define some additional information. I could put in a city, Nashville. I can put in a state, and I get to put in the call type. And here we're going to say this is a local call. And I don't know why I keep capitalizing that O. You can add some additional description information. There are a couple required fields. Now, this is local. I don't bill for local, but I still have to define a cost for this and a duration or a time interval. So I'm just going to say 0 cost. And now what I've done is I've basically just created a local dialing pattern for my 615. Now, everybody's phone system is just a little bit different or a little bit unique. Maybe your local calls start with a 1. Maybe they don't. So you may not need the 1. This may be something like just 615 and then 11 digits. I've been in other systems where all local calls are only 10 digits. And those are actually pretty easy because then you don't even have to worry about dialing, local area codes or putting local area codes. You can create a very simple rate line that looks something like this, equals 10 digits, and that's going to encompass all my local calls. So I wouldn't even need to enter any kind of digits or calling party. So that's one way to do that. But we're going to go ahead and, like I said, dig in a little bit further. So we're going to add some more information. Like I said, in some systems, it could start with a 1. Other systems, it may not. Sometimes I've been in systems where it's a combination of both. So I may need to add 2 rate lines for my local. So to do that, I'm just going to click Add Rate Line. We're going to add another rate line. So for here, I'm just going to do 615, starts with, and equals 10 digits. Because now this one does not have the lead 1. And I'll call this the same thing here, Tennessee. And our call type will be local. And we'll go ahead and do the same costing. And now what I've done is I've just defined, and I got that capital O in there. I just defined another local, so this is going to accommodate anybody that dials a 1615 or just a 615. And if you have a lead 9 in front of your numbers, that's no problem as well. So maybe if it's sometimes has a lead 9, sometimes doesn't, you're just going to add another rate line to accommodate. So really all we're doing is we're just adding our local area codes and prefix. So I've actually got one more, so we're going to add another one in here. So I also have a 931. Whoop, wrong field. So I'm going to say 931. I'm going to say starts with, and that's, again, my 11 digit. And this guy will be Manchester. And we'll call him local as well and give him a rate. And now we'll go ahead. And again, we're just adding our local prefixes, local area codes. If I need to get extremely specific and add an additional prefix, I can do that. It's just a matter of coming in. I can edit the rate table, add another rate line, and then add a prefix right there. So you can get as specific as you want or be as broad as you want. The purpose of this session here today is really to just keep these general and keep these broad. Identify my local, identify my long distance, identify my international, my toll free. And then everything else is just going to build up my long distance rate. So now that we've added some local, we're going to go ahead and add a couple toll free in here. So conceptually, it's going to be the same exact pattern that you just added. So we're going to say equals or starts with 1-800, and I'm going to change my length to equals 11, and we'll call this toll free. All right. Notice I didn't put a city or a state. You don't need to. That's not a required field. I don't bill for our toll-free calls, and there we go. So now we've created a toll-free one as well. So now what we've done is we've identified our local. We've identified toll-free. Let's go ahead and identify general international. So like I said in the beginning of the call, I know, and in most cases, if it's a U.S.-based company, they're going to be dialing 011. But international calling can be any number. Sometimes it's a 10-digit number. Sometimes it's an 8-digit number prefixed by 011. So we could leave this and say the number being dialed or the final called party is 011 with any number of digits. That could lead to some false billing because maybe you have some extensions that start with a 011 or something similar. So I always like to just do a minimum of 7 digits in here. And that's usually going to rule out any kind of false positives with regards to rating. So all I'm saying here is anything that starts with 011 is a minimum of 7 digits is going to be an international call. I'm not getting into the countries. You absolutely could. You can specify the dialing patterns for the countries. That's absolutely a possibility. Most of the times, again, that's overkill. Most people don't need to know every country that was dialed. They just need to know that an international call was placed, and these are the rates for their international calls. So here I'm just going to flag this call type as international. I could give it a description if I want to. And I'm going to set a rate, we'll say 0.12, and I want this to bill every, we can do 15 seconds. We'll just do 60. So now what we've done is identified local, identified toll-free, and again, other toll-free numbers, I would add the 1-866 and various other toll-frees in here. There's only about 7 or 8 of them. We've identified international. So now we need to identify our long distance. So it's pretty straightforward to be able to identify the long distance. So I know, and in most cases, the long distance calls are really just going to start with a lead 1, and they're not going to be these local area codes and prefixes. So pretty straightforward. These guys are going to override my next pattern. So we're going to add the next pattern here. And what we're going to do is we're going to say the final call party number starts with a 1. All right, equals 11 digits. All right. Now what's going to happen is these patterns here will override this. So it's kind of like anything that is not my 615 or my 931 will then be considered long distance calling. So that's why it's important to get those local kind of dialing patterns in there first, because they are much more explicit and specific than the just general long distance, which is basically anything that starts with a 1 that is over 11 digits. So I'll call this long distance, and we'll say 0.01. And we'll build that guy every 60 seconds as well. So what I've done is I've now created my local dialing patterns, my toll-free dialing patterns, my international, and now my long distance. Now these guys will all override and take precedence over this guy here at the bottom. Thus, if it is not a 1931, then it's going to fall into my local category. But if it is a 1931, then it's going to, or I'm sorry, my long distance category. But if it is 1931, then it's going to fall into my local category. Same thing goes for, if you don't have to dial a lead 1 before dialing a long distance, you're just going to say, hey, starts just number equals 10 digits. And again, these guys right here will override that one. Now, in most cases, and most likely in your call manager, that's not going to be the case. Most long distance calls do need to start with the lead 1. All right, so now we've done some general identification. We've created our rate table. We have our local, long distance, international one right here. And we're going to go ahead and save this guy. So now that we've got that, he'll go ahead and pop over here. So if I go back to my rate tables, we'll see our new rate table. And there it is. Now, we've created our rate table, but we need to tell our system to use it. Just because we have a rate table doesn't necessarily mean it's in play. So for that, we need to go over to our cluster, and we need to assign the rate table to our cluster. So I'm going to go ahead and pick on my first cluster here, and then we're going to run some reports and show you how to generate some reports to be able to utilize this. So if I edit my cluster, you scroll down a little bit, and you'll see that now you have selected rate tables. I don't have anything selected, but I want to use this one. You can absolutely use multiple rate tables. So maybe I have 10 international rate tables, and I need to be, local rate tables, and I need to be very specific. I need to be as specific as here is the area code, and here is the prefix that is being dialed, and these are considered local. You can absolutely create one that's going to be local, and then you can create a secondary one that's going to be all long distance, and you can create a third one that's maybe all international. The nice thing about that is you have the flexibility to kind of say, okay, I only need to edit one, or I only need to edit this other one. So you can definitely do that in here. But now that I have my local long distance international rate table, we're going to give this guy a save, and we're going to go back and take a look at a report. So I'm going to go ahead and pop back to our call reporting screen, our history screen, and we're going to run that same search that we were running before, but now we're going to add some additional fields. So I'm going to look at my department, and again, I'm going to pick on my finance department. Helps if I'm in the right cluster. And there's my finance department popping up here. And the other thing I'm going to pick on is this guy over here because I know he's got some calls that we were looking at before. So now I'm looking at any call that originated at my finance department or this 0123 department. I'm going to change my date range to the current month. And we're going to take a look at some calls. So now what we're going to be looking at is detail of the calls that originated at my finance and my 0123 department. So you're looking in here going, well, that's great. I don't see any rates. So from the detail perspective, it's just a matter of clicking the Show Hide Columns button. And if you scroll all the way down to the bottom over here, you're going to see accounting information. So here I can add all of those fields that I had added into my rate table. Now, you probably don't need all of them. Some are going to be more important than the others, but we're going to add them for the sake of argument here. And if I scroll off to the right, now you're going to start to see what I added. So I defined everything that is not my 615 and 931 as long distance, and there we have our long distance. And remember, I said 1615 is going to be local, so there's my local. There's the rate that I'm going to go ahead and charge, the rate per description, 0.1 cents per 60 seconds, and then there's the total cost of this particular call. So for the local ones, I did put the city and state in there, so we see that. But essentially what we've done is we've basically created a very simple rate table that's going to outline your local long distance calls as well as toll free. And if we wanted to add internal in there, we absolutely could. We're just going to say anything that equals 4 digits is going to be internal. So that's one way to go ahead and do that. And now what we've done is we've created a very basic rate table that meets a large majority of the needs. So let's run some reports on this. So for this, I'm going to pop over to the report section here, and we're just going to create a new report. And we'll just call it billing report. All right, there's a couple different ways that we can go ahead and create this report. So if this is for a particular department, I can add those departments in here. We'll just call that finance department. That's a good option. And we're going to say the originating department. If I could spell it right. There we go. And we're going to pick on our finance group. All right. Now, I was using another one in the other example, so we'll just add 2 just for the sake of argument. So now I've got 2 departments in here. I don't have to be picking a certain department. I can run this cluster-wide for all outbound calls because what we're going to do next is we're going to break down this cost by department. So if I wanted to see, hey, what departments are allocating the most cost into my system, absolutely possible. Same thing. Instead of breaking it down by the originating department, I might break it down by maybe the final call party number or all calls going out of my gateway. Again, a lot of different ways to be able to break that information down. My departments right here are my finance and my 1, 2, 3, 4. So those are the guys that I'm picking on for this demonstration here. All right. And now that we've got our departments in here, this is going to bring back any call that was placed to or from those, or I'm sorry, originally from those departments. So the next thing we're going to do is, okay, that's great. Now I can see the departments. I'm getting some call statistics. What we want to be able to do is break down by department. I want to know the costs per department. So for that, I'm going to pop over to my grouping section. And in my grouping section, I'm going to group on those departments. All right, easy enough. But the next thing we need to do is now we need to see the cost. And maybe I also want to be able to see the end user and if one person has an excessive amount of cost. So I'm going to break it down by my department, then by my end user. And what I'm going to do down here is I'm going to go ahead and add my accounting total cost. So that could be found right there, or you can just search accounting, or you can search cost, and it'll bring up that same information. So now what I'm going to see is a breakdown of my departments and the costs associated to those departments. In my detail, I want to be able to see the cost associated to those calls. So maybe I'm going to add the call type so I could see if it's local, long distance. Maybe I want to add, if you want the rate in there, the rate per duration you can add in there, and maybe I just need to see the total cost of those calls. So we're just adding some general information. We're going to give this guy a save, and we'll give him a run. And there's my report right there. So if I run this, I'm going to run this for, again, the current month. So also, keep in mind, my report is set up to only search for a couple departments, so that's what I'm going to see. I'm going to change this to HTML because I am including detail and I may have a lot of columns in here. So if we run this guy, now what we're going to do is we're going to see a total breakdown of all the calls from my department, and we're going to go ahead and see the costs associated in those departments as well. And there we have it. Total of all calls to or from each one of those departments. Here's a breakdown of the departmental cost. Remember, I chose to add the department and the end user, so we get to see both the department cost, and we also get to see the end user cost and who's making or placing the most calls. I could see I've got 208 here for Steve, who has 106 calls. If I go ahead and click on that information, we're going to be able to see the cost and the cost associated to each one of those calls. And you can see over here some of these don't have cost or a call type because I didn't add it. If I went back to my rate table and added a 4-digit number in there, then these would show up as internal with 0 cost. It's just a matter of, again, compounding and adding onto that rate table as you see needed. So this is a great way to be able to go ahead and get a nice general billing type report. But maybe we want to also see not just the department breakdown. Maybe I have to bill specific departments. So right now I'm filtering this report based off of the department, but we're going to change that a little bit. We're going to build more of an accounting-based report at a specific department level. So I just made a copy of this report, and we'll just call this finance. So now we're going to build one just for our finance department. So for this example, I'm going to go ahead and remove the other department. And instead of breaking this down by department, I want to see the specifics. I want to see which call types they have. So for that, I'm going to actually group this by the accounting call type. So what this is going to do is then show me the type of call being placed that we defined, like we defined our local. That is a call type. We defined our international. So if I save this one, copy that, save him, and we'll give him a run. Now you're going to see a different set of information because this is really specific to one department focusing just on the types of calls being made, not necessarily just a costing report. So there we see. Again, we're looking at our entire department here. I could see 332 calls, and now we're saying 40 of those are local, 140 of those are long distance, and 10 of them are toll-free. You'll also notice we have our no associated call type here. If I click on those, I get to go down and see what they are, most of them being international. I could see some conference calls in there and things like that. And of course, I can always go back to my rate table and add a call type of internal, so that way these would appear up towards the top as internal. Or if I didn't want to see those, I could always filter internal type calls or conference calls out of my report in general and just see the local, long distance, and toll free. The nice thing about having this no associated call type is if for some reason you didn't get something right in your rate table, this allows you to be able to identify that so you can go back, edit your rate table, maybe add some additional local calling or long distance calling. So with that, hey, I want to thank everybody for their time today. I hope we were able to shed a little bit of light on how to build just a very general rate table to accomplish the need of general billing. You can, like I said, get as specific as you want with those rate tables. 9 times out of 10, most of our customers don't need the level of detail of every city, every state, every single dialing pattern, area code, and prefix in the entire world. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass the ball back to you, Matt, and thank everybody for their time today.
All right. Awesome job as always, Victor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. We're moving into the Q&A session of the webinar. I know it's getting late. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the Q&A panel in the bottom right. We do have a couple questions here, Victor. And
all right,
fire them away with you. Sally asks, how do we only cost for a certain department? Now, I think you kind of just covered that a little bit, but I mean, we do know that the rate tables are cluster wide, so maybe you want to speak to that for a quick second.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is a two-part question because there's a couple different ways to do that. So as you said, Matt, that's a good question because, yes, the rate tables are cluster-wide. But when I run a report, I'm only picking, or I can choose, like we did in that last report. I only chose to run it against a certain department. So therefore, yes, the rates are there, but they don't actually get applied until I include either the accounting call type or the call type down in the detail. So any department I would run a report on has costing. But if I'm running a very specific report, then the only time it's going to show costing is if I choose to include it. So that's one way to do it, is really just isolate the report to the department that you're looking to bill back. Or alternatively, when I'm in the rate tables here, you have a couple different options. So one of the things that we focused in on here was just kind of building the rate table so that way you can see, I'll edit one of these, the number that it was going to. In other words, the number being dialed. But if I wanted to get specific and bill a certain rate to a specific department, I can add multiple rate lines per the extensions in those departments, or maybe the devices in those departments, and actually build a very specific rate table that's department-based and add that into the cluster, and that way each department would have its own billing. Again, that could be a complex process, but the nice thing about this is not only are you able to build these in the interface, I don't know if anybody caught it, but these can also be imported. So I can take what I have right here, export this, and manipulate it, and then re-import it. So if I needed to add a whole bunch of extensions in here, I could absolutely take the original number and add all my extensions, and then just import this. And now this is going to only apply to those extensions in that particular department. So there's definitely a lot of ways that we're able to do that. I know it's kind of a little long-winded answer.
No, good explanation. Thank you. One other question we have here from Craig: does Variphy have any sample or predefined rate tables?
Yes and no. There's definitely some things that we can send you. If we're looking for something general like this, No, not really, because this is very specific to my area code and prefix. So, if you're looking for a general table like this, it's probably best to build it on your own because then you're going to have your own area codes and prefix. Now, we can absolutely generate something like this and send it to you, and then you could edit that CSV file and run an import. So that's definitely something we can do. But we also do have a domestic table out there. As you can see, this guy right here is very, very explicit. So this is something that we can send to your customers, but I will let you know that most customers don't need this level of detail. But two, we do not maintain this. This is not something that we charge for. So as new area codes and prefixes are added to the world, we do not update and maintain this, but this would be a good start for somebody that says, hey, I need very specific costing down to the city level. We can go ahead and generate something.
Correct. All right, thank you. And the last one I'm going to squeeze in here is the question is, can we also display this costing in dashboard widgets?
We can. Yes, absolutely. So from a dashboard perspective, what you would do is you would create a widget, and we would use our grouping statistics widget. So let me go ahead and use the bill back, and I know we are out of time. But from what you would do here is you would set your search the same way we were searching in all of our other reports, but your grouping type could be very similar to what we had before, the department, but then we're just going to make sure we pick our accounting cost. So the same way we built the report is the same way we would build a dashboard to be able to demonstrate and show that information. Or if I didn't want to see the department, maybe I just wanted to see the call types for a particular department, I could go ahead and do that as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Victor.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm going to steal presenter rights back.
Sure.
I'm going to make sure I share my screen. All right. Thank you for bearing with us, everyone. Okay, drum roll, please. I believe this is the moment we've all been waiting for. The winner of this week's webinar $50 Amazon gift card is Pat Ruck. Woo! Congratulations, Pat. Your account manager or Verified rep will be in contact with you soon to get that $50 Amazon gift card over to you. And lastly, I just want to thank everyone for joining and attending today's webinar, and just let you know we are looking to we're having our webinar next week on the new 12.2 features and enhancements that are coming down the pipeline with the next release. Mike and I will be working on that for you. So please feel free to register for the upcoming webinar. Everyone have yourselves a great day, and thank you for joining.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.